I have a new member in my marital bed. My wife is working outside of Los Angeles for the next 10 to 12 weeks because she's filming her show, and so she's spending the time in our friend's house who is also filming somewhere else in America. So my wife is staying at her house. And anyway, long story short, I'm single dadding it. I'm home alone, and I don't know if I've told you this, Brad. I cannot fall asleep without my wife in the house. Like if I'm at a hotel, for whatever reason, I fall asleep no problem. Like if I'm at a convention or something. But if I'm in my own bed and my wife is not there, I cannot fall asleep. It's like 3 a.m. So Brad, I've invited my 15-pound dachshund into the bed with me, and I gotta tell you, I woke up around 3 a.m. just feeling heat, heat, Brad. And he was just lying on my stomach. So not only could I just felt weight on my chest, and then also just heat. He was 1,000 degrees. So I do not recommend bringing a dachshund into the bed with you. It does not work. I do not recommend it.
Is he the big spoon or the little spoon?
He is. He is. I would imagine he's Little Spoon. Yes, he is. Little Spoon.
Yeah, that's probably for the best.
And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Guigar, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We've got a barn burner of a show today because we've got a couple of big topics to talk about. The main one being Webtoons, and also the sort of changing and lingering advice of elder statesmen, cartoonists in webcomics. But I want to remind everybody that this show is going out live right now to our Live Gab friends over at patreon.com/ComicLab. And you can join at the Live Gab group and watch the show live streaming every week. I'm waving to the gang right now. There is an active and lively chat going on in real time. And also the shows are archived in case you are stuck in life or learning or living and need to watch the archive show. And that is available to you as well. But Brad, jump us right straight into the topic this week because, Nelly, we got a lot to talk about.
Well, we're recording this show in late June, and what happened? We had a big week last week in webcomics that was kicked off when Kennedy Holman on her Twitter account showed a photo of what was a New York sign, I think, in a subway for Webtoons that said "Comics are literature's fun side hustle." And it had art from Rachel Smythe's Lore Olympus. And of course, the idea of comics being literature's fun side hustle was very much found to be insulting, disparaging, frustrating, and just plain old dumb by people in the comics community, especially people who were using Webtoons as a platform, trying to get traction there. They found that to be very insulting. That brought up a lot of people that, especially from like the first generation of webcomics, we'll call them the webcomics old guard, who were saying, "Hey, why are you guys there in the first place?" Right? And that got a little bit of pushback, a little bit of a okay boomer mentality, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that because there's a lot there's a lot of nuance there. There's a lot of information and a lot of things that are worth discussing when it comes to that. But then also in the same week, somebody who has been around comics for a long time, a 20-year career at least,
in webcomics and
very good. And somebody who came up at the same time we did made a Patreon post that they made public and said, hey, people ask me all the time, how would you succeed if you were starting today? And he shared his thoughts and said it kind of came around to, honestly, I don't know. I don't know how. It seems like it would be very tough. And I'm purposefully not naming him because I want to talk about the concepts and not the person. Mm-hmm. And also because you really get the feeling, like I'm looking at his tweet right now. And he says, listen, my answer is doubtlessly incomplete. It will have ignored vast tranches of evidence. It's full of confirmation bias, but I answered the way I would have done in person. He's just trying to share some thoughts. So we're not going to, we're not going to say, oh, this was bad, that was bad. But we do want to take some of those thoughts in this same show and drill down on them so we can talk about the concepts, because there's so much there that needs to be unpacked.
Well, boy, where to start? I mean, let's start with Webtoons, because this could turn into a whole hour conversation between just these two topics. Lord knows Brad and I have yelled down the phone to each other about this for almost an hour. So Webtoons, let's just get this out of the way. They are massively successful in doing a specific thing very well, which is they have basically defined an entirely new way of reading comics. As most of us know, the Asian market, the most folks access the internet via phone, not via home computer, versus the Canadian North American market, which traditionally, at least, was via your laptop, your home computer, your work computer, your school computer. And so most websites, at least in the 90s and early 2000s on the US side, were designed for desktop computing. On Korea and Japan side, a lot of stuff was designed for mobile, because it was just more people were commuting, more people were using phone. It's just a small cultural difference. Anyway, step into that Naver, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which was the parent company of Webtoons. Basically, the owner saw the collapse of the manga market in, I believe it's actually pronounced manhwa. Is that right, Brad?
That's right.
The market in Korea in the 90s, much like it happened in the US, and said there's got to be a better way. You know what? With phones, I bet if we stacked them vertically, it would work great. Anyway, line Webtoons. Now Webtoons took off like wildfire. It spread to Japan, spread to Korea, or spread to China, excuse me, and then made it to the U.S. and kind of supplanted, I would think, Brad, what Go Comics and King Features were doing or trying to do with traditional horizontally oriented American newspaper comic strips. It just did it better. Let's be honest about it. They just did it better. And they grew like wildfire. And then the real money for them as a company came when they started taking their existing properties, making mobile games out of it, making mini television and web television shows out of it. So that's where the real money was for Webtoons. So I think that's where this advertisement is coming from, is that this is a marketing team whose bread is buttered not necessarily by comics, but by taking comics and applying it to mini web games, apps, portable games, TV shows, web shows. And so they're not really focused in the way you or I or somebody at Image Comics would be focused on the comics themselves. They're focused on, like, how do I grow the wider business? And I think, Brad, that's where this advertisement was coming from. Don't you think?
Oh, I think so. I think absolutely. And I think you hit the nail right on the head when you say that Webtoons really came out in front when they went to that vertical scroll, and that was the whole thing. They doubled down on that. Everything was vertical scroll, and caught folks like us and a lot of other people flat-footed who had been going for years saying, I'll get around to mobile optimization one day. I'll get around to that. And I did it. I dragged my feet on it. You dragged your feet. We all did. We all did. And we got caught flat-footed on that and watched Webtoons come in and just dominate. And so what happened was, right now you've got an entire generation of young cartoonists and comics artists who are convinced that Webtoons is the only place in town. It's the only platform that they could possibly find an audience. They, in their minds, in fact, if you read a lot of what they're saying, this is the only place that comics readers are. Right? That this is where comics readers are. They're on Webtoons. That's where the audience is. That's where I've got my best chance of monetization. They don't know how to publish necessarily, and Webtoons is plug and play, and that's important. And also, number 4, they don't really consider you a professional until you're on Webtoons, to which Dave and I are going to say, hey, that sounds familiar, because he and I and a bunch of us lived through all of that whole thing where there's only one place to get an audience. There's only one place to get money. There's only one place to be a professional. I don't have to know how to publish. I can just plug and play. We lived through this. It was called KeenSpot back in the day. And that's everything that you are right now living through with Webtoons. We've been there. We called it KeenSpot.
I was going to say, we've lived through that, and we also lived through the earlier iteration, which was called the newspaper, which was, an earlier version of that's the place you go to not have to think about how the publishing actually happens. You submit your comics, you make the money, bada bing, bada boom, you're done. And so it's this idea, and by the way, all businesses go through this sort of atomization of towards individual creation, and then someone comes along and says, what if we syndicated this, or what if we made a talent agency, or what if we put it all together into one publishing house? And that happened with film, it happened with radio, it happened with TV, it happened with comics, and it's happening in real time from what webcomics were in the early 2000s to this. And it's just worth reminding the world, Brad and I and a bunch of other people have made a great go of living a very independent life and using tools and companies where possible to be incorporated into our business, but not necessarily being subsumed into their business.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I was talking about this with Scott Kurtz over the phone over the weekend, and we kind of came to a realization. Our generation of independent artists, right? That first crew that came in the early 2000s, right? We were defined as kind of fighting with the older generation who said there's only one place you can put your comics. There's only one way to get monetized. And we were all saying, no, we're going to do this independently. There's a path for us. It's a better path. And there was a lot of fights there between us and the syndicated cartoonists who were very much saying, that doesn't make any sense to us, right? We were defined by that in the early 2000s. And now we're being defined by exactly the same fight, Dave, except instead of fighting with the older generation, we're kind of having these, and it's not a fight for quite so much as it is a very passionate exchange of how things can be done with the younger generation. Now it's the same exact fight. It's the same exact conflict, all the same different references are there, but now we're having it with the younger generation.
In a way, yeah, but I think you would agree to these differences, though, is that the problem we had with older generation who were coming out of print, where they were like, you kids are ruining it. We had a good thing going, and you are coming in and ruining it. And we were like, no, you don't understand. The print world is falling apart. We're trying to build something new. And by the way, all the complaints that you ever had about print, we're trying to address by owning and controlling our own careers, right? So that was our argument with the older generation. With the younger generation, we're in a little bit trying to say, don't necessarily go down this path so whole cloth. Maybe own and control your own path a little bit more. We're trying to help you. And they're like, sit down before you fall down, old man. Like, we're burning up a trail on Webtoons. And we're like, look, we get it. They're offering you book contracts. That's nice. They're saying we might be able to develop this into a TV show. That's nice too. How much do you own? How much do you control? Don't get screwed. We've seen this show before many times. Be careful. And I think some in that generation don't want to hear it. But that's okay. I get it. I mean, a part of it is a generational thing of a whole group of people that grew up not with the World Wide Web or hypertext transfer protocol, but with apps. And the idea that that's how you access the internet was you went through apps, you went through Twitter or FaceTime, or excuse me, not FaceTime, Facebook or Instagram or Webtoons or whatever the app is going to be. Even the appization of Reddit and stuff like that is that there's a whole generation growing up that doesn't necessarily see the wider picture of the World Wide Web or the internet broadly speaking. And they just see it as like, no, you have to go through these gatekeepers, these companies that control the apps.
Right. And that just isn't the case, especially if you're doing good work. And that we've always got to take a little pause and say, listen, we need to talk about this. I might as well just put this here. You need to be doing good work. And if you're doing good work, people will go to where you are, whether you're posting it on Twitter, whether you're posting on a website, whether you're posting it here, whether you're posting there. You can build an audience. Dave and I have very strong feelings about where you should be building your audience. And that is on a website, or at least having that website as the center of your hub of activities so that you can control that. Absolutely, we're going to say that. And it doesn't matter that you don't think that people don't use websites. The fact of the matter is, provably, empirically, factually, they do. Okay. And it's very powerful. You've got to understand that part. But here's the other thing you've got to understand too. It's very easy. In fact, here's one of the things that this old guard web cartoonist was saying, was like, I don't know how anybody succeeds today. And it's very easy to kind of get confused by that, because it seems like the only successful web cartoonists are the ones that have been doing this for a long time. Right. And so there's a couple of things there I want to unpack. Two things. Number one, and you see this from time to time, where somebody says, how would a web cartoonist or how would an independent comics artist survive and succeed today? Build a time machine back to 2001, right? You see that a lot.
The most unhelpful way to say that. Yeah.
So here's the first place I'm going to unpack, and that's this. We, as the people who've been doing this for a long time, we are mentors when we're saying stuff like that. And I think we need to be better mentors. And I know that, like, build a time machine is like a tongue-in-cheek phrase. It's not meant to be taken seriously, but there's an element of cruelty to that. In other words, it's saying, well, I guess I was born at the right time and you weren't. Tough noodles for you. There's an element of cruelty to that, and we need to be cognizant of that, so we don't let that harm that new generation of cartoonists who, by the way, are coming into, let's face it, Dave, right now, this day and age, a golden age for independent comics.
Yes.
A golden age. There's I know it feels oppressive. I know you think that social media is keeping you down.
With tools and services that we would have killed for in the early 2000s.
Truthfully, it's a
no joke.
Wonderful time. You've got so much opportunity. That's part of what we want to talk about this so much about, is because we don't want you to get discouraged because here's the other thing. Let's say you're convinced that the only way you can succeed in comics is to go back in a time machine to 2001. There's an insult there too, because it totally writes off a bunch of creators who came in the second decade of webcomics after 2010. Whole bunch of creators coming in after that who found success.
Bigger success.
You're writing off Rachel Smythe and Laura Olympus, right? Webtoons right off the bat. Alice Oseman with Heartstopper, which is being developed into a Netflix series, came in the second decade of webcomics. Nathan Pyle, Strange Planet. He's a second decade guy. Ngozi Ukazu, former guest of the show with Check Please, second decade. Sarah Anderson, Sarah Scribbles, second decade of webcomics. If you go to Graphtreon right now, and you had this idea, Dave, I actually followed it up, and you're going to see a lot of names in the upper registers of comics on Patreon that are old school names. You also see a bunch of names that you and I have never heard of before.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, a bunch
who are absolutely doing great work, have found their audience, and because I checked you, Dave, and you were absolutely right. There's a whole bunch of what I call second wave, second decade of web cartoonist authors there. Here's where we have to put our minds in the right format for this to work. We get a little bit confused by the fact that there's a lot of 20-year veterans that are successful, right? And then you think, well, the only way to be successful is to get in that time machine. Here's the thing that we have to understand, and this is something you hear on this show week after week. This thing that we do takes time.
Yes.
It takes a long time. It takes time to build an audience. And I know you don't want to hear this next part, because I certainly didn't when I was starting out. I can't imagine you're different. It takes time to get good at comics.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason Dave and I are passionate right now, is because if you hear the only way to succeed in comics is to get in a time machine, you're going to get discouraged, and you're not going to use that time that you should be using to get better on your own journey.
Yeah, it's disingenuous survivor's bias too, because when a cartoonist our age says, well, I don't know how you would make it today, I always want to say, you jerk, you didn't know how to make it when you were in your 20s.
That's the truth.
We didn't know how to, and the thing is, because it takes stick-to-itiveness, it takes hard work, it takes consistency, it takes learning from your peers what's working, and it takes keeping your head on a swivel to see what's changing around your industry. That's the same thing that it was when we were in our 20s, and it's the same thing for people coming up right now. That's not different. You know how to succeed in the same way that you did not know the surefire path in your 20s when we were coming up in the early 2000s. And the same is true now. Of course, they don't know the surefire path. There's not a surefire path. The surefire way to ensure that you will probably do well, hard work, consistency, learn from your peers, keep your head on a swivel. That will do it. That's going to be the trick. And yes, like Brad said, it's going to take 5 to 7 years or 10,000 hours, if you want to say it, to get good at cartooning and get good at the business of cartooning. Remember, first you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast. And that's going to take 5 to 7 years or about 10,000 hours.
And by the way, 5 to 7 years, maybe more. I know it took me more than 7 years to get good. I'm still wondering whether I've gotten good, but it took me a long time to get
Brad,
to where I thought I was doing decent work.
Humility aside, you're good. That's not. We can set aside our humility. Like it took. We were good enough at 5 to 7 years. We were making a living, making our income, all that sort of. Like, let's not be disingenuous about our own.
Fair enough. But here's my point, and that is this: it took me a long time. And there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees. No. And by the way, that's not only a comics thing. That's true of all of the creative arts and all of the performing arts at the professional level. There's no guarantee. Tom Cruise has had a decade. I'm going to go with Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks has had a decades-long career in the performing arts. Came in the 80s as a comedy actor, as a comedian. Do you know who else came in to a comedy in movies in the 80s? Pauly Shore. Okay. Now we haven't seen as much from Pauly Shore. His career took another turn, perfectly valid turns. I'm sure. I haven't checked in on Pauly Shore. I don't mean to throw brickbats at him, but here's my thing. Neither one of those people were guaranteed anything. They weren't guaranteed a future. Dave and I, who have been doing this 20 years, we are not guaranteed a 21st year or a 22nd year. There are no guarantees to any of this. You're not. If anybody comes up and tells you they know how to guarantee success, they're selling you something.
Well, and I think if we're being generous to our friends and peers who throw up their hands and say, I don't know how you would succeed today. Maybe it's the fact that they don't want to be caught out with some form of implied guarantee that if you do X, Y, Z, then you'll succeed. And I get that. No one wants to be like, I did the things that you said and I don't have success, because obviously there's no guarantee that the path works out for you. So they probably don't want to put that out there. But I think I do think it is a disservice to say, I don't know how you would succeed. Because it's like, dang it, the 20-year-old you would give the answer. And the answer is hard work, consistency, keeping your head on a swivel, and learning from your peers. That's the way you do it. And go ahead, Brad, jump in.
I want to go to another topic here because here's something that comes up quite a bit in these conversations. And it makes me crazy. People are saying, all things that we said, right, Dave? And probably right now, this very minute, somebody is listening to the podcast in their ear and they're saying, here's the thing that Brad and Dave don't understand. It's different today. Webcomics is oversaturated. Webcomics is crowded. How scary is that? I knew what you were thinking there listening at home. Webcomics is crowded. It's oversaturated.
There's no way to break through.
Right. Here's the thing I want you to think about. Okay. Yes. Webcomics, there's a lot more in volume webcomics being produced today than there was when Dave and I started out in the early 2000s. True. Here's the difference you got to understand. Most of that stuff, well over 80% of that stuff that's being produced today is not good. It's not very good. It's got low quality. The writing isn't there, and the art certainly isn't there. It's not good. And in a social media dominated landscape, what happens to that is it filters to the bottom of the tank almost immediately because not good stuff is getting no engagement. Okay. So it's filtering to the bottom very, very quickly, almost instantaneously, which means that it's almost invisible. It's almost negligible because it's almost not there. It's disappearing as soon as they're posting it. Okay. That's what you've got to understand. When back in the early 2000s, yes, there were much fewer people doing this, but it was nigh impossible to find readers, certainly compared to today. That's when we used all those things that we've talked about before, web rings, and we we formed collectives like Keen Spot, and then we formed other collectives like Blank Label Comics and so forth. We made up an awful lot of stuff as we went along, which is, by the way, if you're a young person today, what you need to be doing too. You need to start making some stuff up as you go along. But compared to those two time zones, right, between the early webcomics and today's webcomics, it was very difficult to find a reader. And if you found a reader, good luck getting them to buy something by putting a credit card into a website. That sent people screaming out of the room. The idea, hey, a Patreon, forget about it. Kickstarter, forget about it. You getting somebody to put their credit card into a website and monetize what you're doing. We relied on ads. We relied on completely passive revenue through ads. And right up until the time people started putting ad blockers on their devices. And at that moment, if you would have given us a magic wand and say, disappear all the ad blockers, we would have. But it turns out that it brought us to crowdfunding, which has been way more lucrative for publishing than ad revenue ever was. But that's my point. That's my point. And that is that, yes, it feels like it's a lot more crowded, but all of that stuff is filtering to the bottom. At which point you're saying, but Brad, I'm doing good work and my stuff is filtering too. At which the only thing I can say to you is, again, you've got to you've got to do that frequent, consistent, significant approach that we talked about. You've got to keep posting that stuff. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep posting because you're not going to build. Remember, Dave, not too long ago, we had a listener that said, hey, how do I get the most number of responses? How do I get the most engagement with my first post? And we said, you do not understand what you're getting into. You don't understand what webcomics is. It isn't about getting the most number of engagement for your first post. It's about posting over and over and over again and picking up like a rolling stone, picking up moss, building up your audience one at a time, little by little. It's painstaking. You better freaking love comics because it's the only thing you're going to have for the first couple of years is your love. But that's, again, this thing takes time.
It does. And the thing, not to switch topics, but one of the things that made me frustrated about the Webtoons marketing thing, just to switch back for a second, is that Brad and I are over here advertising that, like, look, this is a career worth doing. It's worth owning and controlling on your own. And we get it that Webtoons for a lot of people is a potential easy switch to flip, where you could potentially go from 0 to 10,000 readers within a couple of months if you're good on Webtoons. We get that. This is a platform that's dedicated towards comic readers, and we understand why people would want to use that, even if they don't see it as the be-all, end-all, as a stepping stone, right? And that's why it was so frustrating to have this corporation, who is to us and to younger people a sort of hallmark of where comics are going and where people are reading comics right now, to have them say that comics are the side hustle of literature, right? And so just to reemphasize, I just think it was a bad marketing choice. But the thing is, for you, you have to realize Webtoons, like many other things, is one tool in your toolkit. You are ultimately owning and controlling your own career. And so you cannot throw all your eggs in this one basket, in the same way that you shouldn't be throwing your validation into the hands of a small marketing team, probably based out of San Francisco, that doesn't really use Webtoons. And they were given this job to market Webtoons to New York subway riders. But what I'm getting at is, neither look for your validation nor look for the holistic push of your entire career from one corporation, one platform. It is a tool. Remember, you are the one that's using multiple platforms, multiple tools, multiple services, multiple social medias to reach an audience that you can build up on your own, that you can own and control. So neither look for validation nor look for a single platform to launch you into the stratosphere. it is a slow growing thing of 5, 6, 7 years, maybe more, of, like Brad said, being consistent, significant, and enjoyable, frankly. And you'll get there. But it's not an overnight thing.
Here's another thing that I want to talk about, because it comes up a lot when you're talking about people who have been doing this for a long time from the independent comics side, these OG web cartoonists. And that is that they had kind of a legacy audience that they've built, and they have 2 decades of goodwill that they're playing off of. All right.
Right.
Something that we got to understand there, this whole idea of having a legacy audience. And that is this. You've heard me say on the show before that there are infinite readers. And sometimes we make a mistake as creators when we think about our audience as one finite group of people that just kind of follow us along from this thing into the next thing into the next thing. And it feels like it's the same group of people because, like, if you're doing a Kickstarter, you see the same names pop up. A lot of times you start to become familiar with the names. You see them following your Patreon. It's easy to kind of think that this is the same group of people that you're just bringing on a legacy basis from one to the next. But the fact of the matter is, Dave and I can tell you, we are audience building every day of the week. We are audience building on a continuous basis. And if we don't, we're gonna lose that audience.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, think of your readership like the ship of Theseus. In the sense that at any given time, you're losing 5%, and hopefully you're gaining 6%. But let's say you're gaining 5%. You're losing 5%, gaining 5%. Every month you're losing 5, gaining 5, losing 5, gaining 5. You have completely ship of Theseus to your audience within a couple of years because, I mean, Grant, that's not the case, obviously. You're going to keep a few. But you get where I'm going with that, which is it's going to be a completely different audience. It's not a legacy stuck with you forever, ride or die, we're going to go everywhere you go kind of an audience. You constantly have to earn it. That's the key thing. With every post and with every new platform that you might be jumping onto, you have to re-earn it. It's not a guarantee that they will stick with you.
Yeah, and let's go to the second part of that whole thing: a legacy audience and 2 decades of goodwill. Well, listen, I got news for you. Goodwill only gets you so far. We are on it. Comics has always been commerce, and we are on a transactional basis with our audience. The minute we stop doing good comics, that goodwill evaporates. The moment we stop doing work, the moment we stop engaging in different ways, the moment that stuff stops, the goodwill stops. Right? Same way as people, when you stop uploading to your Patreon, all that goodwill that you thought you had starts to dissipate a little bit. It might get you to coast for a little while on it, but goodwill only gets you so far. Comics are transactional. We have to keep bringing it month after month, year after year, if we want to be professional comics artists.
Yeah, and so I think, as weird as it was, the comparison to Pauly Shore is kind of accurate in the sense that we do have a survivor's bias amongst OG cartoonists now of like, well, we made it because it was easier. Motherfucker, it wasn't easier in early 2000s. There was no social media. There was no Reddit to speak of. Credit card transactions, as Brad was saying, wasn't possible. We were reliant for the most part either on going to conventions, physically going to conventions, or somehow borrowing or stealing another cartoonist to recommend us in their blog, right? Or potentially these larger web rings or groups and amalgamations. That was how we spread the word. That was harder. But there's this weird survivorship bias that it's like, well, it was easier back then. The only way to do it is a time machine. No, it is not. It was not. It was demonstrably easier to do it now than it was to do it then to grab an audience. So it's only because you're talking to the 1 out of 1,000 cartoonists that survived from the early 2000s that you're getting this weird survivorship bias that, well, I don't know. It was easier in the earlier 2000s. It was not. I guarantee you it was not.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, let's wrap this segment up, Dave, with we've been saying, well, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. We've been shaking our fingers a lot, and that's fine. Or at least I have. But let's pretend we've got a young person in front of us who says, well, listen, Webtoons is the only way to go. It's the only way I can build a career. Let's give this person some thoughts that perhaps that they could take from that and figure something out. In other words, what advice would we give to a young person starting out today?
Okay. The first thing I think you would do is for the first couple of years of your comic, let's say the first 2 years, really focus on the art side of comics. Don't even worry about the business per se in the first. I mean, you can passively, obviously, if you really love it and you're thinking about it all the time, there's going to be some passing thoughts. That's fine. But for the most part, the first couple of years are art building. And so to that point, I would say buy a URL. Let's say it's susanscomics.com, right? Buy susanscomics.com. You can just park it. It doesn't necessarily have to, you don't have to build and develop a whole website yet.
Right.
But if you wanted to do one of those simple, basic, like Google websites, or you could use a Squarespace site or something, something basic that has, content management system. Great. That's fine. And then point susanscomics.com towards that. That's fine. You're off to the races. You're using social media to share it, to build it, to distribute it. You're posting it on Reddit, on subreddits like comics or on funny or on adventure or on fantasy or whatever subgenre you might be writing to. Can you be doing something like Tapas Webtoons? Yes, but I would strongly recommend you read that contract before you click yes. There's always ownership and control issues. I, for example, started a Drive page, Brad, and realized, oh, you dummy, you haven't read the contract yet. And so it's just been sitting with nothing posted on Drive over on Webtoons because I was like, you know what? No, I've really developed this into something special. I don't want to accidentally sign away some right that I'm not paying attention to. So I, like most smart cartoonists, don't jump into something unless you've read and vetted the contract. And then build, hunker down for a couple of years. And as you're putting out consistent, strong work, your best work, you're spreading it as best you can, and you're keeping your head down and you're working. How about you, Brad? What's the advice you would give to a young cartoonist?
Listen, I know they don't want to start with a website, and that's fine. That's okay. If you can okay boomer us on that one, that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're just going to turn around and go back to doing comics anyway, so it doesn't matter. But listen, if that's not a good fit for you, okay, that's okay. It's good advice, but you don't have to. We're not going to force you to take it. But I would think for yourself that you have to think that you have something. Think of a wheel, and you are at the hub of that wheel. You have to put something there that you can control, wherever that is, however that looks for you. And then the spokes of that wheel are going to go out and try to look for audience and readers wherever you can, as long as at some point you've got that hub that you always control, that you can always point those people to. So one of the spokes might be Webtoons. One of those spokes might be Tapas. One of those spokes might be Twitter, Reddit. There's a lot of places where audience lies. Meanwhile, if that hub, as we're suggesting, is a website, make sure that it is mobile optimized. Make sure that if somebody does go to that website from their phone, that they get a vertical scroll. That's crucial. Nobody wants to pinch and zoom your stuff. In the same way, you've got to make sure that whatever you're posting is as readable as possible on the different places you're posting it. Like Twitter, you have to remember, like we've told you in the past, if you're doing a 4-panel horizontal strip and you're posting 4 panels horizontal on Twitter, that's horrible. That's unreadable, right? Find a way to turn that into a square, 2 panels up, 2 panels down. Now you got something. You do not want to make people have to pinch and zoom to read your comic, because they just won't, especially if they're not sure you're going to be any good. They take a look at your comic and they got to do work to read it, and they're going to say, what's the chances that punchline even ends or even lands at the end, right? So, but anyway, my point is, control your hub, send spokes out into the universe that bring people into that hub, and then buckle up for the long haul. This is a long build. And the fact of the matter is, even though I'm telling you, Dave, if you would have told Brad Guigar in 2002 he just wasn't doing great work yet, he wouldn't have believed you. So you're probably in the same place. You're not going to believe me, but you're not as good today as you're going to be in 10 years.
Yep.
So you might as well start now so that 10 years comes earlier for you than if you drag your feet, right? And that's the crucial part of all of this stuff is when you hear people saying, legacy audience and 2 decades of goodwill and all this other stuff, Webtoons is the only place you could possibly build an audience. It gets frustrating and it gets demoralizing, and you might quit before you really should, before you've had a chance to really see if you could ever be good. That's the danger that Dave and I are worried about, is that we don't want you to want you to take a look at that and get so frustrated that you don't give it a shot.
Absolutely. And I want to speak for a second about the broader idea about how you take advice and where you take advice. Yeah. Because Brad and I, with all the best intentions, are week after week giving you our best advice for how to make it when regardless of what age you are, starting right now as a cartoonist. Yeah. But here's the thing. I want you to cultivate the idea that you are going to run everything through your filter. So you're taking in what Brad and I are saying. Yes. You're also, by the way, taking in what these OG web cartoonists are saying that are throwing up their hands saying, I don't know how you would succeed, because even they have good kernels of advice in those same write-ups that Brad and I are disagreeing with, because they're smart, they're savvy, they're good. And so whenever you see someone like Ngozi or Sarah Anderson or Smythe talking about their cartooning, take it in, soak it up, and run it through your filter. How can you apply it through your career? What Brad and I say is, again, given with all the best intentions, but we might not be the right advice for how you are planning to attack your career. So run it through your own filter and build a career that works for you, for the genre, the style, the tone that you want to develop, by taking us and many other sources in, because you're keeping your head on a swivel.
Yes. And then you can do, in 20 years, you can be on your podcast saying that you did what we did, which was that we took all that in and we made something up as we went along. We found our way, we found our path, and it worked out. Here's the thing. Dave's absolutely right. Listen to all that stuff. I will tell you, when we talk about, start with a website and build on social media and own and control your own work, I'm going to tell you, I really think that is the best way to do it. Now, you have every right in the world to take all of that and say, sounds good, but I'm going to do a little variation on that theme. I'm going to take my own approach to it. I'm going to take what I know and add that to what Brad and Dave said, and I'm going to come up with my own thing. We want you to do that.
Absolutely, yes.
We're dying to see what innovations you come up with. Some of them aren't going to work. Some of them are just going to flop. But some of them maybe are going to work. And Dave and I are going to be the first ones cheering for you the loudest when that happens. And the second thing we're going to do is say, what can we take from that? What can we borrow from that innovation that works for us? So here's the kind of the moral to all of this. We innovated our asses off in the early 2000s. We had to, or else we wouldn't have survived. Take that innovation, take what you can use from it, and make your own innovation, because we guarantee you this, we're going to be watching, because we're good at this now. We're good at innovation, and we know good at innovation when we see it. And when we see you succeed, we'll be the first ones to say, that's something I can use.
And then we will steal your business plan.
I was trying not to use the word steal, but you're absolutely right.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So, Dave, I hear you've got an update from San Diego.
Haha, from San Diego Comic-Con, yes. So this has never happened to me before, Brad, and I wanted to share it in the case that it could help the wider community with potential trademark and IP problems with Comic-Con. So as everyone knows, San Diego Comic-Con, I think they're celebrating, what, year 52, 50? It started like in the mid-70s, so I think it's year 52, 50, something like that. Anyway, San Diego Comic-Con, for many, many decades, did not defend their trademark to the use of the phrase Comic-Con. And now, as most folks know about trademark, there's a kind of a multi-step process. First, you file for the TM mark, which is a trademark. And then over, I think it's a decade of use, you can get the registered mark, which is the R in the circle. That's the more official, like we've super duper have proved we've used it in the market. But it also requires that you defend the mark. You have to shoo away basically everyone else from using the mark jacuzzi, or else jacuzzi becomes, common parlance. Or you shoo everyone away from using Kleenex, or else Kleenex will become common parlance. You have to defend your trademark, right? Or else you get into those two historical representations of people that went awry with trademarks. Anyway, so Comic-Con, for decades, allowed other shows around the U.S. to use the phrase Comic-Con. And then all of a sudden, about 10, 15 years ago, they got a bug up their butt and said, no, we got to defend this trademark. So they've started filing basically trademark defenses around the country. Some have been pretty successful, like against the show in Salt Lake. Others against like bigger shows like New York Comic-Con, not a small show, have had more legal troubles. Anyway, long story short, Dave Kellett kind of forgot all about this in the 2 years since I've done San Diego Comic-Con. And I did a little exclusive pin for San Diego Comic-Con, Brad. And the pin itself, not a problem. But I made a 2-cent backing board. It's basically a business card with the Sheldon logo, and it looks real cool. And it just says Comic-Con exclusive, which is true. It is a Comic-Con exclusive. However, for the first time, I got a letter from Comic-Con, who they're always very nice. They're like, hey, you don't own the phrase Comic-Con. You can't use the phrase Comic-Con. We need to talk about if you want to license the phrase Comic-Con to be used on your, and I'm like, geez Louise. My first reaction was like, God damn it, I'm not a big enough fry to mess around with, like, go sue New York Comic-Con again. I'm not your enemy here. I've gone to San Diego for 22 years. But then I was like, I get it. You're trying to defend your trademark. And so I just wanted to give an update to the world. Just a reminder that comic book is co-owned by Marvel and DC. Don't put that on your printed versions of your comic books. They will at times come down on you for using comic book, which is a problem that Image Comics has had in the past. And then Comic-Con is owned, theoretically at least, by San Diego Comic-Con in the USPTO. So don't use the phrase Comic-Con like Dave Kellett stupidly did. You could probably get away, as I will do, by using, quote, con exclusive. Con is a generic enough, and it's not a specific filing with the USPTO. So, Brad, that's my first update this week, is don't use the phrase Comic-Con.
So you didn't even use the logo. You just used the words Comic-Con exclusive. And that was enough to set them off and get a cease and desist.
And they're filing, you can file trademarks different ways. Their filing is without a logo, with the phrase, just the phrase Comic-Con, and I think it's hyphen. But that is their trademark filing. And so, is it silly? Yes. Do I understand why they're defending the mark? Yes. Is it a bummer that I spent, I don't know, $70 making these backing cards that I can't use publicly? Yes. But it's a small lesson learned. So, but anyway, I want the world to learn from my mistake. Don't use the phrase Comic-Con in any sort of public advertising. They're clearly scanning the web more and more, and they're keeping an eye out for it.
So I've got one other update for today, and that is Backerkit, which you've heard me endorse here on the show as a way to do back-end servicing on your Kickstarter. Once your Kickstarter funds and you're sending it out, you can get people to kind of buy extra stuff using Backerkit. And I'm a big fan of Backerkit, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you are.
They just announced that they are now launching their own crowdfunding platform to compete with Kickstarter. Okay. And it's worth noting, you've heard us kind of talk like, keep your expectations realistic. We talked about Zoop not too long ago. That was going to be a Kickstarter competitor. And we were saying, listen, the big thing you've got to look at, our big takeaway on that conversation was, what's the user base, right? How many users do they have? Because that's really kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of making this decision, at least for us, is, how many users do they have? And then, of course, you have to gauge how you personally feel about the rest of the stuff that Kickstarter was talking about doing in terms of crypto and so forth. The reason I want to put Backerkit out there is because Backerkit was used in so many Kickstarter campaigns that it might be getting up there in terms of their user base. I have not been able to find any confirmation of how many people are already registered with Backerkit. Right. But my spidey sense says it might be a pretty formidable number. And so Backerkit is one that at least I want to put on your radar so that you at least can make a judgment for yourself. I'm not going to endorse it as a replacement for Kickstarter, but it is something that is worth being on your radar.
Yeah, I want to speak for 1 second, if I could step back to talk about this, is that one of the frustrations that I have with Kickstarter, and do not get me wrong, I love Kickstarter and I love what Kickstarter has done for my career. I think it has been an excellent service and platform for what I want to do with. I've done, 15, 16, 17 projects with them. They've all benefited from Kickstarter's presence. But here's a kind of weird truth about Kickstarter. They innovated like mad right out of the gate. The first 2, 3, 4 years of Kickstarter, man, they were just firing on all pistons. They were doing so good, and the service got really good really quickly. The first couple of years, for those that remember, there were privacy problems, there were security problems. They were figuring it out, but they figured it out quick, right? And then they got there about 10. I don't know how many years ago it was, but they landed it. They landed the plane, but the problem is, I personally feel like Kickstarter, in changing management, really stopped innovating. They got comfortable and they stopped innovating. And I kind of think that's the truth. We really haven't seen any new innovation or improved service from Kickstarter in a couple of years. Their overall user base has grown. And so it's the perception that's like things are getting bigger and better. They're maybe getting bigger. They're not necessarily getting better. And here's the problem to that, is that Backerkit offered a genuine service that genuinely helps many Kickstarter campaigns, especially big ones. And Backerkit innovated. Backerkit kind of picked up the slack of where Kickstarter left off and said, you know what's the problem? The problem that needs innovation and entrepreneurial spirit here is the whole fulfillment side of Kickstarter. And meanwhile, Kickstarter's on the couch going, it's fine. People don't need anything to do. We're done. We're going to rest on our laurels. And so to that end, Backerkit innovated, and to the victor go the spoils in terms of innovation. And so like Brad, I don't necessarily endorse it. I don't necessarily recommend that you use it for social or for a distributed fundraising campaign, but to their credit, they're keeping working on the innovation front.
Absolutely. And so it's worth keeping track of. So, Dave, we should at least answer one question while we're in front of the microphones. And so I'm going to throw this one at you. And that is this one that comes in from Al, who says, how does page size or format affect my composition? Here's what he's talking about. I don't want to focus on a Webtoon square by square composition yet. What he's talking about is that panel by panel vertical scroll. As I want to develop my flow on a page because I'm looking to print my comic. Recently, we've heard great advice from you guys regarding future-proofing and having a website. I initially started my webcomic thinking to print it on a horizontal page like the old Calvin and Hobbes books because I was making it viewable on a monitor as anyone else would just tilt their mobile to see it. iPad owner here, he says. By the way, again, you can't get people to scroll. I don't know how you're going to get them to tilt, but let's go back to the question. Then I took the challenge to make it a square page shape like Dave's comic and saw that the pacing and storyboarding can vary. It's a mix of long story and some singles regarding a comedic slice of life. So let's talk about this. What he's talking about is page design. How does page size and format affect composition? And there's a couple of things. He mentions Webtoons. He mentions going horizontal and then square. So let's drill down a little bit on page size and composition.
Sure. I think the interesting thing to note here is that we can completely throw out horizontal from the equation, because I think anything you're presenting digitally, you're either going to present it full page for maybe desktop or maybe tablet users, and you're going to do sliced up comics for phone readers, right? So we can leave horizontal completely out of the equation. So let's talk about the page design and slicing up. I personally think you always want to design for the book first, but with an eye on how you were going to slice it for the web. And in so doing, you're making a really pleasant, effective, powerful page that also slices into a really effective, powerful vertical scroll comic. I think especially if we were talking about Rachel Smythe before with Laura Olympus, did an amazing job building an audience by a perfectly designed vertical comic. But I think we can all agree, especially with the first volume, some pages didn't translate well when they were sort of cobbled together to create a page in the book version, because I don't think that they designed with a book in mind quite clearly. And so I do think you still want to design for your final book with your final book in mind. Design that page, whether it be a square format, which is kind of what I do for Drive, or the more traditional, taller format for Marvel, DC, Image, or some other format that you have on your own. You want to design for the page, but with an eye towards how you are going to slice it up vertically. Brad?
Absolutely. That goes back to that first part of the question. I don't want to focus on a Webtoons square by square composition yet, right? Panel by panel. Right. And that's what Dave is saying is absolutely right. You design that for the page, but as you're doing it, you're keeping in the back of your mind that you're going to go through and crop every one of those panels individually and then present that in a vertical scroll. Which means that you're going to make some choices there. Overlapping panels that are parallelograms instead of rectangles, are things like diagonal gutters. That's going to start to cause a little bit of problems for you.
Or even long horizontals that might stretch across your entire page. You'd probably avoid those too. Yeah, absolutely.
Or like I still use long horizontals, but I plan the composition inside that panel to be able to be cropped. So like I'll have some stuff on the sides that I can get rid of, and I can just crop in on the important part. So that's what we're talking about. We're always planning for that vertical scroll, even as we're laying out the page. And if you keep that in mind, you can start to make some very smart decisions as you're going. Here's another thing I want to talk about, and that's this. You're talking about putting that stuff on your website horizontal, and you can just tilt the device so that you can see it horizontal. That's not a great approach. I want to try and talk you out of that as much as I can. You think it's just no big deal to tilt that thing so that you can read it, but your readers remember, those people that you are counting on, and we just got done talking about in the first part of the show, what a long, steady climb this is for you to try to slowly amass audience. You're not going to do that by doing stuff that they've got to work to read. And I know you're saying, oh, it's nothing. It's a flick of the wrist. It's still too much work. They don't want to do that. Remember, they're scrolling through endless content. If they see you for the first time, they don't even know whether you're good yet. And maybe if they catch you on a bad update, maybe they're going to walk away thinking you aren't good. And the next time they see it, they're not even going to bother with tilting that and looking at it. All of which to say, you've got to make it easy for people to read your stuff. Otherwise, they're going to scroll right by.
Also, it is kind of a truth universal that in any sort of sales or retail environment, you don't want to annoy the consumer. And in this moment, if you want to think of your comic as a retail moment, you're not selling necessarily anything, but you're trying to entice them. You don't want to annoy them. It's like, have you ever gone to an open house, Brad, where they're like, please put these booties on your shoes? And you're like, God damn it. What is this floor made out of diamonds? Why do I have to put booties on? Like, you've just annoyed me. So it's one of those things where you're telling yourself, but aesthetically it's worth it. But for the way I want to deliver this, it's got to be horizontal. They'll tilt it. The people will tilt it. They won't mind. But okay, let's say a percentage do. They'll be a little bit annoyed by it, because you're kind of saying you're the special little prince that has to have your comic turned to the side, and people don't want to be annoyed. They just don't. They don't.
And they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. And again, okay, let's say that you want to do this. you'd better be an amazing writer, because the minute that they don't get rewarded for that tilt and reading experience, they're going to leave you behind. They're going to be like, this isn't worth it. Why am I working? Last time I read this, it didn't even make sense. I don't know what the hell's going on. You better be an amazing writer to get somebody to do that, because they're going to get burned a couple times and just scroll right past you once they recognize your stuff.
Absolutely. Now, let me do a kind of a big picture thing that I want to talk about. Why yet another reason why you want to design for the page first, and not for the sort of Webtoons sliced vertical version first, which is you can feel the difference for a vertical scrolled comic that was designed with unlimited panels. This update is 40 panels long.
Yes.
And the thing is, you feel it when a comic has been designed for a page, because it is X amount of work for the reader to get to a satisfying ending, which, if you remember from Brad's continuous advice, is you want every page to end on some kind of oomph. Sometimes it's going to be an art oomph. Sometimes it's going to be a character oomph. Sometimes plot, sometimes comedy, sometimes drama, sometimes action. It's ending on an oomph. And readers kind of have an inner sort of voice when it's taking too many panels to get to an oomph. You know, like, what am I reading here? And so by designing it for the page, by designing it for the book, you have kind of naturally constricted yourself towards a really compact, efficient distribution of writing to satisfying ending. And I think actually that benefits a lot of comics when you're designing for that page in mind.
Yeah. Now, if you're going to do that, now you've got, let's say you've started out and you've got a combination of some horizontals and some squares, and you're trying to put that all into a book. At that point, you can't go back and say, well, I'm gonna do it differently. Of course, we would say the best thing to do is to plan for that book when you start your comic. But remember, like Dave, we've both had to creatively make up for a couple of bad decisions we made when it came time for the book. There's other ways of doing this so that you can get around that, right? You can get kind of a squarish shape. Let's say you're doing strips. You could get kind of a squarish shape by stacking two horizontal strips on top of each other and playing two strips per page. You can also do things, I've seen you do this, I think, as a matter of fact, Dave. You've got something that just needs to hang out on the page by itself, but it doesn't fill the page. So you do a little illustration, you plop it down there in the corner, a little character dancing around, or maybe even, best case scenario, kind of do like that old Ollie Funt editorial cartoonist approach, where you've got the comic up here, and then in the corner you've got a little somebody down there delivering a little bumper or a little semi punchline or a little extra something. I've done that, by the way. I did that in Evil Inc. In the first 9 annual reports all the time. Because my stuff was never fitting the pages right. And I was doing it completely backwards. I was taking 4-panel comic strips and then designing graphic novel pages out of them, which was really adding a whole lot of extra work for very little return, driving myself crazy. But every now and again, I'd have to put a little character down there, have him say a little something, or maybe just dance around. Hey, I'm a character. I'm just down here filling up space, just to make the page look good.
Yeah, and a couple more suggestions. If you found that you've designed for vertical and now you're bringing it into a book, and building off Brad said, that's an excellent idea. Other things you can do are have big blocks of color in this tradition or style of a UPA animation, how they would just have a big floating block of blue or red behind it. You can kind of float that behind panels that you might have to, kind of crunch together. It makes the page feel a little bit more cohesive. Another thing you do is take a lesson out of how video editors, if you've ever watched local news and they have some footage that was only caught on a vertically oriented phone. Brad, have you ever seen this? And yet now they have to present it for 1920 by 1080 video display. So what they'll do is they'll show the phone vertically dead center, but then they'll take the overall image, enlarge it in behind it, and then either knock back the transparency or fuzz it up in a way so that it fills the 1920 by 1080 TV screen with the vertical clear in the middle, but the overall TV filled, so they don't have black TV, obviously. You can do a version of that with your comic, which is you can cobble together whatever weird squares you've had from vertical onto a page, And then you could take one key moment, one key character design, blow them up, knock them back to 10% transparency. They're kind of floating behind the page or something. It's a nice little zhuzh to tie the page together, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything in the same way that video that's been blown up to 1920 by 1080 does it mean anything per se. It's just to make the screen look good.
Oh, when you were talking about cobbling up a bunch of squares, I got to tell you, I think that these two old squares that have cobbled together a show have done pretty good for another episode of ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Well, Brad, I got to tell you, it's another salacious, salivating segue from Brad Geiger. Fantastic. All right, everybody. Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab, a thing that did not exist in the OG webcomics world. So we'll go ahead and say that twice, patreon.com/comiclab. Ah, that's fantastic. I'm going to tell you, you've been listening. I don't want to steal your line. Brad's going to say it. Okay, fantastic.
You've got the next line. You say your host of Ben.
No, you didn't. You didn't say you've been listening to Comic Lab yet.
I did.
No, you didn't. You did not.
I did.
Did you?
I
said you did the square. You said the square. These two old squares have been.
All right,
we're cutting this bit, obviously.
You might be. We're both out of it. Hold on. You're probably right.
Oh, let's ask the room. Did Brad actually say you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics? Because I want to know if I had a stroke. I'm waiting for the answer. This is important to me, Brad. No one's answering. God, how long is this delay? Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
They don't want to pick a side when mommy and daddy are fighting. That's fun.